In the dense forests of Kentucky
Was my first instinct. I was scared.
lives a monster that has been terrifying campers.
It has been linked to fatal attacks.
Does seem to just kill for pleasure.
And killing cattle for pleasure.
The face off, the ears were off, the tongue was out.
It's an aggressive creature.
Locals call it Bearilla.
Now guys, if I say run, y'all run.
Kentucky, a small rural state nestled in the eastern center of the United States, famous for its horse racing, bourbon, and bluegrass music. American history is never far away here. It is in this state that we find the forests of Daniel Boone and small wooden houses of the pioneers. The era of the early settlers has long passed, but nature still dominates this landscape. For centuries, locals have been told that the forest hides aggressive, potentially lethal creatures. The last on this list, the Bearilla, a biped with werewolf-like features.
I'm Jason Caldwell. I'm 31 years old. I've lived in Mount Sterling, Kentucky my whole life. I like to hunt, fish, and take care of my kids.
My name is Jeff Caldwell, and I'm his father. Got a great son here. I'm really proud of him.
It's been 15 years since Jason saw Bearilla. The encounter has haunted him ever since.
Well, Jason, he always has been a hunter, you know. After this, he's uncomfortable being in the woods now by himself, you know, and I can understand why, you know.
Summer '99, me and 5 other guys camping. I was gonna graduate in a couple years, and we had a fishing trip planned the next day, you know. So we was gonna be up early, no drinking that night at all. You know, it was just good, clean fun. We go to sleep, 3 of us stay in the truck, 3 of us sleep in the tent, it's a small tent. Guys hear something, wake me up. It says something's around the tent. Open up the tent and look. I seen it 40 yards away, tall, 6 foot, 6.5, 7 foot tall, gray, silver-like creature. You know, it wasn't a human-like face, a little bit of a long muzzle, and then it was gone. It was just a feeling I've never felt, you know, seeing something like that. The other guys immediately had fear. I had fear. After, you know, I told them what I had seen, they was ready to go like I was. And, you know, the other guys was with us. They wasn't in the tent. They didn't get to see it. They didn't believe us. But we left. You know, we got out of there. So we haven't been camping back there again.
You know, I believe what he said, you know, because, well, in '96, I was coming home from a coon hunting competition about 4:30 in the morning, and I come around the road and in a curve, and there was something come off the road, you know, and cross the road, about 6, 7 foot tall, you know, and it had a sort of a muzzle-like, pointed ears, you know, silver-like brown, you know, just different colors. And then I just swerved over, and then it just turned and went off over the hill, you know, and I'm gone, and it's gone. Who's gonna make up a story like that, you know? And I thought maybe, you know, it's somebody, you know, maybe dressed up in a, you know, an ape suit or something, but 4:30 in the morning, you know, on a road that's in Clark County, Kentucky, and, you know, who would be out that far? You know what I'm saying? Just nobody.
I stay in the woods, you know, I never see, you know, deer won't come close to us. Raccoons wouldn't make that kind of racket. There was nobody else down in them woods. You know, I have no explanation for what it was. So it just prompted me to do more research, and that's when I found out about Bearilla.
The town of Mount Sterling lies at the base of the Appalachian Mountains. Founded in 1790, it boasts 7,000 residents, every one of them proud of their history.
My name is Chip Manley. I'm a local high school history teacher here in Mount Sterling, Kentucky. This was in many ways kind of a trading center, founded mostly by Scots, Irish, and English settlers who came here. Most people that are here trace their ancestry back quite a bit here in Kentucky, descendants of a lot of those early settlers that came through here. Camping, hunting, very popular pastimes here in Montgomery County. kind of a rite of passage for young people to have those skills passed on to them from their fathers and grandfathers. Well, here in Montgomery County, we're not very far from the Daniel Boone National Forest. A lot of that is very much almost virgin forest. You still have a real glimpse into what Kentucky looked like 300, 400 years ago before all the settlement came in. In Kentucky, there have been a lot of cryptid sightings reported in the last several decades of Bearilla, literally from one end of the state to the next. Once you get outside of the cities and small towns, you quickly run into a lot of just open farmland, a lot of wilderness, especially to the east of here. So for things to live in those areas outside of the usual traffic of humans here in Kentucky, it's quite possible that every now and again their paths intersect with those creatures in the wilderness.
I think that's an interesting thing.
This one piece will make 52 layers.
Watch on mobile devices or the big screen. All for free. No subscription required. Download Veely now.
In these isolated areas, everyone has something to say about the rumors of monsters lurking in the forest.
Most people have heard the stories because the stories go way back in history in Kentucky. My mother has old stories of seeing creatures in the woods.
I tell my grandkids all the time, there are no such thing as monsters.
Well, it's been about a year ago. I was driving home. I seen something go across the road in about 4 steps. It was just outside of where my headlights would reach, so I just kind of got a glimpse of it.
There's some wild bear and normal things, but no Bearilla.
It was dark in color, very large, probably 7, 8 foot tall.
If he says there's a Bearilla, he's pulling your leg.
Like I say, it was very large, so I've never seen nothing like that there. I can't say that it was a Bearilla, but I can't really tell you what it was.
I don't know, it might have been me. I'm the meanest thing in Mount Sterling.
In Kentucky, if you think you've seen a monster or the paranormal knocks on your door, it's Ron Coffey you'd call to the rescue.
Hey, my name's Ron Coffey. I started this 40 years ago. We were considered kooks.
I am Lori Coffey. I am the wife of Ron Coffey. He's a cryptozoologist known worldwide for studying the Bearilla.
Cryptozoology means it's an animal that is known but unidentified. And once it becomes identified, then it comes into the field of zoology.
Ron and I started the Gateway Paranormal Society back in 2008. Together, Ron and I researched Bigfoot and the Loch Ness Monster.
And I'm sure that the Bearilla, Bigfoot, and all that one day will be known, but right now we don't know what they are.
The Bearilla, however, I let Ron handle. It's more aggressive than any of the other cryptids we've encountered.
According to Ron, you need a certain amount of background information to better understand the Bearilla phenomenon.
Well, first off, the name. How did it get that name? Back in 1972, a farmer saw it walk across the road in front of him, described as solid white, long-haired, rather hunched over. But anyway, he was the first person to actually go to the media about it in 1972. And the only words he could think of to describe it was it's half bear and half gorilla. The news media picked up and called it the Bearilla. So that's how it got to be the Bearilla. And then there was a whole rash of sightings along about that time. Most people just describe it as basically people use the word werewolf as being the best description, and I hate to use that word because people automatically get the wrong idea. I don't believe in werewolves, not in the traditional sense, but that's the description most people give. It looks like a werewolf.
Aside from minor differences, witness testimonies are remarkably consistent. The Bearilla is described as being about 2 meters tall, with a coat of black and silver fur, able to move on 2 or 4 legs. It has a wolf-like face, long, menacing arms, and sharp claws and teeth. If you see one, run. It was during his childhood, on a terrifying summer night spent in the woods, that Ron Coffey's quest began.
Cousins and I were someplace we weren't supposed to be, of course. We saw what looked like a very large dog walking on all fours toward us. It comes up on two legs and lets out kind of a screech, howl type sound. It was tall, had very long pointed ears, real long, elongated snout, and actually begins to chase us on two legs. Chased us probably about 20 feet, and then it veered off into a little trail back into some brush and disappeared. But it moved very quick, and it was very adept on two legs. A bear doesn't move that way. A dog doesn't walk on two legs. So it had to have been something totally different to what we're used to. And of course, we went back and told everybody we saw a werewolf. Of course, everybody said we was crazy, but we were just kind of laughed at. So, you know, that was the end of that story. We never saw it again. When we get together to this day, we still talk about that. So yeah, it stuck with all of us.
Since then, Ron Coffey has never stopped looking for the monster. In 2012, Bearilla resurfaced in the region.
Actually, a bit north of here in Waddy, there were reports in 2012 of a string of violent attacks. I'm a freelance reporter, and I worked at the Mountain Sterling Advocate, a local newspaper here in Kentucky, for 3 years. There were just a lot of farm animals were mauled. It was over and over the same type of attack. It was the face off, the ears were off, the tongue was out. I think it was over like a span of 5 weeks that this happened. None of them were eaten, just mostly just viciously attacked, like it was almost for sport. So whatever the creature was that did this didn't really leave very many traces behind, so it was just confusing to the residents. All the attacks happened at night, and so nobody really got a good look at it. People were very afraid. A lot of people were taking extra measures to lock up their animals at night. A lot of people weren't letting their children play outside. It did create a lot of panic in the area for months and months after the attacks. I've spoken with a local cryptozoologist about the incidents, and I know that he's very credible in my opinion, and he sort of related it to what could possibly be known as a Bearilla.
In his 40 years of research, Ron has studied dozens of cases of bloody attacks attributed to Bearilla.
The Bearilla's got a real habit of being able to disappear. It's an aggressive creature. Really, the first modern sighting happened actually in 1944. A teenage boy was fishing, and it actually tried to take his fish. And he described some creature came up out of the bank. He described it as large, wolf-like, silver gray hair. So he put up a fight with the thing. Now, he lost. He said it turned around and actually grinned at him and walked on off with the fish, but he had to be treated at a hospital for deep lacerations. And the way we know this happened was some of the hospital employees actually leaked this information out.
The only fatal attack of a human occurred in 1981.
It never was officially listed in any newspapers. It leaked out actually just kind of by word of mouth from the people who originally responded. The police found a camper, door ripped off, blood smeared on the camper, and they found remains of people, not whole bodies, remains of people. One of the hands was clutching a handful of grayish hair, and they actually found the girl too. She was up in a tree about 20, 30 feet up in a tree hanging over a branch. What was left of her. And the tree bark had the same grayish colored hair that was in the hand. And then it just basically stored just dried up. And some of the original responders have said that they were actually threatened by government officials not to tell anything they had seen, because actually the whole economy of that area is based on that recreational area. You know, you wouldn't want something like that to get out. That would not be good for the economy. And like that's the only one where it's been really implicated it could have been a murder of humans.
The history of Kentucky is closely linked to the great American pioneers and their westward expansion. The best known of them is Daniel Boone, who is to this day a local hero. The people of Kentucky have a love of nature and adventure in their blood.
I'm Miles Hoskins. I'm the president of the Montgomery County Historical Society here in Mount Sterling, Kentucky. Kentucky was actually opened up probably by the French Canadians. They came in here as early as 1650. They were probably coming down with the Iroquois Nation into Kentucky to trap beaver fur and do early exploration. Not much went on till about 1767 or so, when Boone traveled all over the eastern part of Kentucky. And he was a noted Indian fighter. He was captured and lived with the Indians for some time, and they called him Big Turtle. They gave him an Indian name. But his basic role in Kentucky was more or less leading people in here. He was the one that really got people fired up about coming to Kentucky.
Boone led many folks through the Wilderness Trail into Kentucky and is generally regarded as one of our great pioneers for settlements.
Most of the people probably came into Kentucky in those early days. Some were literate, some weren't. So their oral histories had to be pretty important to them.
At the time of the pioneers, when most of the U.S. territory was still unexplored, stories circulated about the dangers of the forest.
The folks that settled this region, the Scots, the Irish, the English, they brought their superstitions, their legends, their folklore here with them. When you have settlers that came into this region and had to clear out the forest in order to create the cities and towns that we have today, that forest was always at the edge. That forest and what was out there was always kind of at the edge of civilization.
When it got dark, it was dark. And there's always something that goes bump in the night. And I'm sure Kentucky had its share of myths and tales, just like all civilization's done since the dawn of man.
And I think in many ways, the presence of the forest, the unknown in the forest, really has an effect upon Kentucky even still today.
According to Ron Coffey, the legend of Bearilla has its roots in the many cultures that have passed through Kentucky.
Now, they've got legends of all different sorts, but the physical description is the same in every single legend. The Native Americans had legends through this whole area, the Shawnee, Delaware, Iroquois. They all spoke of this same creature they called the Lemmican. Go a little farther north, the Native Americans in that region called it a Wendigo. And then you had out west, you had the same creature, but the Navajos called it the Skinwalker. And of course, basically described just like all the modern sightings are, and it was when the French people settled up in the Great Lakes area. They brought with them the legend of the loup-garou, which is the French werewolf. These combined with the stories of the Lemmican and the Wendigo, which then created basically an American loup-garou. Native Americans didn't sit around and make up stuff just to mess with people. They reported what they see. So if the Native Americans speak of it, it has to be real, plain and simple. They don't add on, they don't take away, it is what it is. So I think it's several legends combined with the sightings of a flesh and blood animal that didn't quite fit into the sequence of known animals, and then the legends have sprung up around that.
But definitely whenever you have the same story repeated over and over and over again, it definitely kind of makes you wonder, what if something like that really exists?
We heard stories of strange events growing up, and it was just something that was part of the local folklore, the tradition really, of growing up in Kentucky.
And so stories that our grandparents would tell us, you know, around the dinner table, those are just stories that we kind of take to heart. I think mystery is a really big part of Kentucky, and I think that's just because there's a lot of rich history that goes back here. I think a lot of it is just steeped in tradition, really takes stock in folklore here, so.
You know, I don't care how well you pass it on. Things get left out, things get added, and never let the truth stand in the way of a good story. So.
Today, Kentucky is world-renowned for its bourbon, but the production of alcohol had humble beginnings with moonshine, a strong drink that almost certainly loosened tongues and accompanied fireside storytelling.
Moonshine was just it was just spirits. It was corn liquor, is what they called it. They would just use corn, distill it down, mix in some sugar, and get that baby going. And when it ran through the worm and out the tube, out came this clear liquid that you could clean your car with. Of course, after Prohibition came in the 20s, people started putting their stills back in the woods, and and they ran moonshine by the light of the moon. So when the moon was shining, they would go out and make their liquor because they could see what they were doing. So it kind of got its connotation from that. It would oil up the mind and the tongue both. And so I think it probably did play a lot of legends grew out of moonshine, and a lot of reputations, I'm sure, grew out of moonshine.
Yes, some people are intoxicated, and some people are mentally ill. But everybody does not fall in that category. And enough people have talked about it and seen it and described the exact same creature. Makes me believe it has to be real.
During a camping trip in 1999, Jason Caldwell saw what he believed to be a Bearilla. But the 5 other campers present that night don't share his opinion. That's the case with his best friend.
My name's Gary Hobbs. Me and Jason's known each other a long time. Well, we decided we were going camping, and next thing I know, shortly after we fell asleep, you know, they come to the truck saying, "We need to get out of here." Could just tell Jason was freaked out, like, you know, he saw something.
You know, I seen what I seen, and I was ready to get out of here.
When he came to the truck, I mean, you could tell he was really freaked out. I mean, he had saw or heard something to where he wanted to leave, and wasn't normal because he's an outdoors type person. You know, he loved to go camping. You know, he loves to hunt. He loves to fish. So it's not normal for him to want to leave. You know, just all of a sudden. You know, so it freaked me out. Was my first instinct. I was scared because I could tell that he was freaked out. So I just jumped in the truck. Well, after I started to wake up a little bit and come to my senses, I thought he was full of crap. Even the guys that were in the tent with him, you know, they didn't see it. They heard some noises, but they didn't see it like he did. So I think they kind of felt like he was crazy. It did cross my mind that he just maybe saw, you know, through the dark something, you know, his mind playing tricks on him. Or,
you know, if my mind was playing tricks on me, 3 of us wouldn't have heard what we heard. The footsteps that went around us, you know, the crunching of the leaves and the timber, and looking out and seeing what I saw. You know, all 3 of us, I got to hear it, but only one visual.
Yeah, but the wind could have blew something across in front of the tent or something.
Nah, I mean, it was clearly something walked past us.
It was another animal. Maybe it's something looking for food.
Nothing that big. There is nothing with that kind of stature in these woods. You know, the color of the coat and the height of it, you know, it was definitely just a Bearilla.
Well, I mean, like I say, he stuck to his story. I believe he saw or heard something. In my mind, it was just an animal. I'm just one of those persons, I guess I can't believe it unless I actually see it.
I'm the type of person that I believe anything until I have a reason not to believe.
Yeah, we butted heads a lot because of that fact. Sometimes I think he's full of crap. I don't know, I still have my doubts.
Ron Coffey has acquired a solid understanding of Bearilla's way of life, and he's happy to share with those who believe in the existence of the monster.
Jason, you saw something strange up at Barlow Ridge?
Yes.
Okay, did it look anything like this?
Yeah, from the back, you know, it definitely looked like that. You know, 6.5 foot, 7 foot maybe.
Okay. Are you willing to go with me to show me about where you saw this and just try to scout it out? Maybe we can see it again?
Oh, yeah.
Do that?
Yeah.
Okay. So there's been several sightings back in that area. Hopefully we can find some tracks or something, some good proof of this.
I'm feeling kind of excited, you know, to see if we might find something, might see something. You just never know what might happen, what you might see.
Well, we don't need anything fancy for this. First thing, we're going to take some plaster of Paris in it. Hopefully we'll be able to find some tracks or something of this Bearilla and pour this out into the track, and we'll have to let it sit. We're going to put this trail cam up where we start, because these things have a habit sometimes when you're out looking for them, they're actually following you. So maybe we can catch it as it's following us, because I know a lot of people have looked, and then when they come back, they find its track imposed on their track. So we're going to try to catch it if it follows us. If we find any strange hair, pick it up with tweezers, put it in glass, don't touch it with your fingers. The camera, and the video camera, this is the way I've done it for 40 years, and this worked fine for me. And we are ready to roll. We'll follow you, Jason.
As his wife, I worry about him. It has been linked to several fatal attacks throughout the country, and so it's a baddie, you know.
I've been accused of having more courage than I had common sense, but I've never really been in fear of anything. But the area we're going to now has had a lot of different encounters, and so maybe we'll get lucky.
He respects this creature for its aggressiveness, and he's always cautious when pursuing it.
This creature I'm going to use caution on. It does have a history of aggression. It's a dangerous creature. People tell me what's the best way to stay safe, and I say don't be stupid. Just don't be stupid. Any animal is going to defend itself, and that's just nature. So basically just use common sense anytime you're out.
He's not really scared of anything. He's good at what he does. He really is.
It was in the Daniel Boone National Forest that Jason had his Bearilla encounter. This evening, Jason and Ron will face their fears together on the hunt for this terrifying monster. This vast forest, protected by the U.S. government, is seldom visited. The perfect hiding place for Bearilla.
Golly, I've never seen it this thick. Maybe 30 yards is when I seen Bearilla walking off. Obviously, it's grown up so much now, you can't really see. It's been 15 years since the encounter, and I guess nobody else has been out here, and there's so many new trees.
This area is known for Bearilla encounters, and we'll try to go down in that area. There's actually something walking right there. There's definitely something right through this area. In the woods, now I don't know what it is. Now guys, if I say run, y'all run.
In Daniel Boone National Forest, Kentucky.
There's actually something walking.
Ron Coffey and Jason Caldwell are searching for the infamous Bearilla.
Well, and you know, when you stand here, it kind of looks like...
Yeah, it's a trail.
Yeah.
But something's definitely used this for a trail. So it's broke off branches all the way through here.
The smallest hint could lead them to the monster.
Always look up in a tree. They've been known to climb. But you can see where something's actually chipped the bark out here. Usually with Bearilla, you'll have more like a claw mark. Let's try this way. There's another tree, good. Possibility right here, some claw marks. This looks more like what we associate with the Bearilla. Long claw, you can see it's out this way. I think there's something a few feet in front of us.
Yeah.
We've been hearing something right ahead of us here since we started. It's not leaving.
Most wild game would have done ran off, but something is definitely staying.
I'd say it's probably not much farther on the other side of that brush. Just enough to stay out of sight.
But according to biologist John Cox, Ron and Jason's search in the woods may be futile.
So I'm an assistant professor of wildlife ecology and conservation biology at the University of Kentucky. Kentucky has been explored by Europeans since the mid-1700s. When the explorers came in, there were bears everywhere. They slaughtered bears, pretty prolifically, but within a few decades, those species were wiped out of this area. At the turn of the century, when humans in the U.S. recognized that, look, we're wiping out a number of species, we decided to pass game laws and try to protect what biodiversity, what game species that we had left. Then we had sort of a slow repopulation growth of these bears from these very remote, what we might call refugia, up in the highlands of Appalachia. Really, it wasn't until the 70s where they started trickling in any great numbers. And it's estimated we probably have somewhere between 300 and 500 bears in the state. My best guess for what people have seen in the woods would be that it could be a young black bear. It's very common that if you do see a bear, it's foraging around trees or something, that it could easily reach up to pull a beehive out of a tree. And when a bear raises up on two hind legs, you know, it looks very humanoid. Its hands are sort of long. But a lot of times people don't get that second glance, or they're not experienced enough to look where the details are. And sometimes, you know, your eyes play tricks on you.
The first modern testimony of Bearilla's existence coincides exactly with the return of black bears to Kentucky.
I know the Bearilla's here. You know, it's just a matter of finding the proof that he's here.
But Ron and Jason are convinced that the monster they saw is no mere bear.
He could be on the other side of the bush right now. We couldn't see it. It's just the vegetation is so thick. And so much of Kentucky is like what we're standing in now. So it would be very easy for a Bearilla to hide in this type of wilderness. If you notice, there's a lot of brush that's broken off right here. So something has actually cleared a trail through here. This has been a larger creature come through. That might be a usable track, but it's not very well defined. I'm going to try to cast it. Like I said, this track isn't very deep at all. I've got doubts if it's going to make anything, but we'll try. We've probably gone a half a mile or better back into the woods. Something is staying just a few feet out of our sight, always in front of us. Whatever this is watching us. It's out there.
Dead end. The plaster cast reveals nothing.
Are we ready to head back?
Yeah.
Okay. I don't think we can go any deeper anyway.
But their belief in the monster is such that they intend to continue their research and prove Bearilla's existence once and for all.
I'd say all senses are very enhanced. Its vision, its hearing, sense of smell, to be able to survive as long as it has without being detected. The whole time we were there was something moving. As we moved, it moved.
I am convinced it was there, you know. Just like we seen down there, 3 foot from you, you couldn't see anything, you know. We kept hearing something down there, and everything else would have ran off.
So while we were looking for it, it was watching us. I know he was out there.
Even though he didn't see Bearilla on his quest through the forest with Ron, Jason Caldwell remains adamant. It was definitely the monster that he came across that fateful night in 1999.
We kept hearing something in front of us. It never got that far away. It wasn't a deer. We don't know what it was. You know, if it was down there beside us, you would never see it. Yeah, I mean, something was with us, you know.
But I just don't believe it was something other than an animal, you know. I think it's crazy.
I'll make him a believer one day.
Sometimes I think he's full of crap. I love him though. He's my brother.
John Cox would like to believe, but
As far as I know, we have no physical evidence in terms of carcasses, in terms of reliable tracks of any kind of cryptid species in Kentucky.
But Ron Coffey believes he has the ultimate proof, strong enough to sway even science-minded skeptics.
I found several tracks in the mud, but this is about the only one I could really get a good casting of. It's just unique because very few tracks have ever been found of these creatures.
But tracks can be very deceptive because the way they look depends on the substrate that you find them in. If you find them in mud, then it's likely that that animal is going to hit that mud and it's going to slide, just like a person would when they step with a boot. And that track's going to be distorted.
As you can see, it's got a human-like heel. It has like canine pads on the bottom of its foot. You can also see what appears to be a line of claws, perhaps. That's why I think it's possibly the Bearilla. It just matches the description of the foot.
It's very easy to be fooled as to what kind of tracks you're looking for. And it takes literally decades to become an expert tracker because of those different factors that may contribute to altering what a track looks like. But, you know, in science, the absence of evidence is not necessarily evidence of absence. You can never say something is not there because, you know, we don't have evidence for it.
Well, there's all different theories. Some theory is it's just an undiscovered canine. Kangaroo was once a cryptid. Platypus was once a cryptid. We know now what they are, but they were a legend at one point. And I'm sure that the Bearilla one day will be known, but right now we don't know what they are.
Particularly small creatures have not been identified. But at this point, we're largely talking about things like plants, insects, but we've pretty much known about all the mammals, the big mammals, for at least about 100 years. There are archaeological sites where we find bones of animals that were here long before Europeans came in. We're just not seeing any evidence that there's any kind of cryptid species that we know about.
Another theory that's actually, this creature may be a creature that we once thought was extinct that is now actually not extinct. It's known as the Empicylon or bear dog. Now, scientists have always agreed that it was here at least 100,000 years ago, but scientists have always disagreed as to when it became extinct.
The early ancestor of the dog and the bear family would be something that sort of looks like a blend between these two creatures. It would be much more rounded, maybe not have so much of a long rostrum or snout, and be a little bit bigger bodied. So it kind of looks like a hybrid between those two species.
The legs are short and stout, and the hips are wide, so we know it could have walked on two legs easily. And its front legs are much longer than the back, so when it stood up, it would have had arms. The feet and the hands look very human-like.
The accounts also explain that this animal walks upright, which doesn't really mesh with the way these animals move through the landscape, particularly the way wolves hunt. They're cursorial hunters, so they're runners. And so four-leg locomotion is much more efficient when it comes to catching prey, particularly if you're a carnivore, than it is to be trying to run around on two legs and catch something. You know, people imagine bears walking around in these circus settings where they're walking and doing this kind of thing, but that's very unnatural for a bear to be able to do that for more than a few steps. If it really doesn't make sense for either a bear or a wolf to be able to walk around on two legs.
The interesting thing is the areas that are still experiencing these sightings, we find remains of this bear dog. So that's why I think they're related.
Millions of years ago, bears and dogs have a common ancestor. But those two branches, the canids, the dog family, and the bears, the ursids, have branched off long ago. For hybridization to occur would be practically impossible. Wolves have 78 chromosomes, black bears have 74. So genetically, they don't match up enough in a way that you're going to be able to hybridize those two species and produce some kind of, you know, hybrid creature of a Bearilla.
We find these remains, and that's exactly the same places that this Bearilla-type creature is also spotted. So I don't think it's a coincidence myself. I think that's what it is, a bear dog.
If the Bearilla belongs more to storytelling than reality, how can we explain the gruesome deaths of cattle in the region over the years?
More recently, in Wadi, they had a rash of mysterious livestock killings. And they were not eaten, they were just slaughtered.
So that's really where the strangeness comes into the situation, because you figure if it was like a wolf or something, they would be hunting for prey and more to like sustain, but it was just more like for fun. So that was really the strange part of the whole situation.
There's a number of carnivores in the world that do what we call surplus killing, but here in the U.S., particularly with regards to domestic livestock, when you see something like that, that is typically dogs. Stray dogs are notorious for killing things and leaving them. So if we're talking about attacking cattle, wolves, and a lot of times with stray dogs, the first thing that they'll grab is the face. And they'll pull that face and they'll rip the face apart, because something like a cow, they're really trying to find some kind of appendage to bite. Wolves don't really, other than the legs, they really don't have anything to kind of grab onto.
They sent off DNA testing out of one of the animals that have been badly maimed, and it came back as a result of canine, but some of the people still really weren't satisfied with that.
The biggest animal we have in this area that could have done something like that we know of would be a bear, and the black bear we have here are not that big. And of course a coyote or wolf could not have done it, period. Nor could feral dogs have done it. That's what's really mysterious about it.
Still, to this day, it really hasn't been confirmed, but most people think it must have been a dog, but there's no confirmation as far as that goes.
Monster or myth? The legend of Bearilla lives on in a state where people are crazy about all things paranormal.
Mount Sterling is one of the most haunted towns in Kentucky and possibly eastern United States. Just because of all the past, we had several Civil War skirmishes here as well as Revolutionary War skirmishes. The town itself used to be full of shoot-'em-up saloons and brothels and a lot of murders. That was a lot of energy that was left behind.
Some people have had experiences in the downtown area, especially the most historical part of town. People have reported seeing like apparitions, possible ghosts in windows, cold spots that they can feel whenever you walk into a certain area where something has happened in the past.
We even had a marshal who was gunned down at the town square. As you cross Main Street, people feel a cold spot in the middle of the road right where he was gunned down.
Well, that we've got a tourist business around here for cryptids and Bigfoot, Bearilla. There have been people who have come into the Daniel Boone National Forest for the very purpose of hunting for those cryptid creatures.
And the reason being is it's the diverse topography here. You go into the east, you've got mountains. Go through the central part in the bluegrass, you've got rolling hills and grassland. You go into the west, you've got swamp. There's more running water in Kentucky than in any state except Alaska. There's plenty of food. It's no problem to walk into the barnyard and swoop up a pig or something if you wanted to, you know. So it's a good food supply as well. More open territory than it is urban, so there's plenty of room for it to roam in. Shelter, food, and water, so that in itself would make it a great habitat for any number of creatures.
But as to the actual existence of Bearilla, opinions are divided.
It's hard for me to believe in the Bearilla in this area. I'd have to see some sort of definitive proof. Of course, the best evidence for any of these cryptids would be actually managing to recover one.
I'd like to say yes, that I would probably believe in the Bearilla. I'd like to think that there is probably things in the forest that we don't know about.
Unfortunately, I don't see enough evidence to suggest that Bearilla exists.
I would have to see physical evidence, you know, to make me actually believe in Bearilla.
And sadly, some people can never be persuaded. If you rode one in with a saddle on it, they wouldn't believe it. That's just the way it is. Some people just don't believe stuff.
There is one school of thought that all the cryptids, such as the Bearilla or Bigfoot, could actually be ghosts of animals that once walked the earth. So, you know, there's a possibility that it could be a ghost of a bear dog.
You know, God bless America. We're entitled to believe anything we want to.
I mean, I tell people the story all the time, and they tell me, you know, I'm crazy.
We all know, based on court testimonies, that our memories are not that good.
I know what I saw. I pack cameras now. I want to have proof, you know, so I can convince people.
I'd be always receptive to see physical evidence, but right now, you know, To me, at least, it only exists in myth and lore.
I definitely think the idea of the Bearilla existing is a cool idea. Something out there that exists that we don't know much about. It's just the mystery in it is really what draws me in, I think.
If such a creature does exist, maybe it's better just to leave them alone and let them sort of go about their own way and live out their own existence.
For Ron Coffey, the explanation is simple.
I really don't believe there is such thing as a monster. I think that all monster legends are based on flesh and blood animals. Animals that we just haven't been able to identify and put a name on yet.